state in designing a successful welfare state. And we've put off change for too long. That is particularly true when it comes to young people. Madam Deputy Speaker, if politics is about choices, then condemning nearly 1 million young people to the scrap heap of unemployment was the choice of the party opposite. So I want to focus my main contribution on how these changes can affect young people and their life chances. Full employment and good quality jobs have been a central part of Labour's most successful governments. That's why fixing Britain's broken system of social security must be a priority for this Labour government. There is no dignity in denying young people the opportunity to learn, earn or making a better life for themselves. And I'm reminded as we approach the 80th anniversary of the 1945 Labour landslide, we must remember previous governments that have dealt with such big challenges. Work was essential to that great 1945 Labour government. William Beveridge's landmark report in 1942 laid the foundation for Labour's post-war welfare state, an NHS, free education for all and full employment. The vision of Labour's leaders like Attlee, Morrison and Bevin was that every citizen would live a life free from want, squalor, disease or poverty with meaningful help when times were tough. But in return, every citizen was expected to play a full part in the social and economic life of the nation. But looking at the high level of people not in education, employment or training, NEETs in that terrible phrase, in my constituency, I can see an economy that is still letting people down. I can see a mental health system that is letting young people down, and I can see an NHS system that is trapping too many young people on a life of benefits. So can I ask my right honourable friend, when we come to bringing the debate together later, can they confirm in her response that we will deliver the employment support young people need, and that we will simplify the way benefits work and the way job centres work so that young people get the support they deserve? And will she work with the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to fix our broken mental health system so that young people have a hand up rather than being pushed down? And of course, our values should be about compassion, and our social security system should be about dignity for those unable to work or who need support. That's why I welcome the protections for those people already on PIP that have been announced. And I've also listened a lot to a common theme in this debate, and I'd like to ask the front bench about this, which is we've heard lots of people raising concern, not that the Timms review will happen, because that begins to embed co-production, as the front bench and many people in this House have said. But there are questions, I think, legitimately to ask about timing and delivery about that in terms of legislation. Oh, yes,
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and I'm very pleased that he could hear my desire to come and intervene. Does he share my concern that the Timms review is too slow and will not conclude in its current timetable until next autumn? And does he agree with me that the Timms review should be accelerated so a package of measures that have been co-produced with disabled people, their carers, including young people, can be implemented in November 2026?
I thank my honourable friend for an important point. I would, if possible, give my right honourable friend, the Minister, Duracell batteries to turbocharge his work in this area.
For giving way. And I want to make this point to him that he and others across the House during this debate have raised concerns that the changes to PIP are coming ahead of the conclusions of the review of the assessment that I will be leading. We've heard those concerns, and that is why I can announce that we are going to remove the Clause 5 from the bill at committee, that we will move straight to the wider review, sometimes referred to as the Timms review, and only make changes to PIP eligibility activities and descriptors following that review. The government is committed to concluding the review by the autumn of next year.
Point of order, Andy MacDonald.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd be very grateful for your clarification. We've just heard that a pivotal part of this bill, Clause 5, is not going to be effective. So I ask the question, what are we supposed to be voting on tonight? Is it the bill as drawn, or another bill? Because I'm confused, and I think people in this chamber will need that clarification.
I thank the honourable member for his point of order. He will be aware that that is not a matter for the chair, and the vote will be on the bill as it stands. We've had a very clear undertaking from the dispatch box as to what will happen at committee. Andrew Pakes.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. For someone who sits in a party which often debates Clause 4, I received today's news about Clause 5 welcome. I think it addresses many of the concerns honourable members on both sides of the House, particularly our side of the House, have made, because there is an urgency to moving forward with this legislation and change, because today's system is broken. The legacy of the last government is shocking. There are 2.8 million people outside the labour market due to long-term sickness. That is the same as the populations of Birmingham, Leeds, Sheffield and Liverpool combined. 1 in 8 young people are outside of education, employment or training. The UK is the only G7 economy where sickness rates are higher than before COVID, and we've heard from others, health and disability-related benefits will cost around £100 billion over the next 4 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, this has a massive impact on our national resources. Economic inactivity not only holds back growth and makes us all poorer, it also blights the lives of those without work. That's why those of us on this side believe tackling worklessness is not just an economic case, it is a moral crusade. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, in drawing my conclusions to an end, I want to see real support for people to get skills, opportunities and jobs. I want to see every 18 to 21-year-old offered a life off benefits and an apprenticeship or training. I want to see real support for people with mental health so they can access the care they want. We need Labour's Employment Rights Bill fully implemented to change the culture of work so that employers work with disabled people to create the opportunities we need. But most of all, Madam Deputy Speaker, we need a system of social security that is there for everyone with a genuine need, so that no one falls into poverty because they lose their job, and everyone who can work is given a path back into employment.
Fal Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise today not just with grave concern, but with absolute conviction, and I will speak in support of the reason amendment from my honourable friend, the member for York Central, and with a plea for the government to pause, think, reflect and bring back something that will work for the betterment of disabled people. Disabled people, this whole debate, I'm afraid to say, and I've been saddened to hear, has shed, not all members, people have been presented in a negative light. Disabled people are not a burden on society. They are part of society and they make an invaluable contribution to our society as it stands. And the support that they receive allows them to make that invaluable contribution. If this bill is passed, it will do unconscionable damage to disabled people, their carers and families who are already on the brink of in this cost of living crisis. It will deepen poverty, increase hardship and undo decades of progress in social security. And I urge the government to withdraw now and come back when it is fit for purpose. Myself and my Independent Alliance colleagues have been clear and consistent. We are acutely aware of the devastation this bill would cause. We have fought and will fight it every step of the way until a fit-for-purpose bill is before us. Yet today we are being asked to sign off on billions in cuts without any credible data. And we have a moving target where elements of the bill that are published will no longer apply when it comes back to this place. The department's analysis, we've heard 150,000 people will be pushed into poverty, maybe more than 20,000 children. And despite the talk of concessions, which were rushed out and tweaks made, they do not change the core injustice. This government wants to create a two-tier welfare system where today's disabled people get help, but tomorrow's they are discarded. New PIP claimants will have to pass a cruel new threshold to qualify for PIP compared to existing claimants. My question to the Secretary of State is, please can you explain to my constituents in Dewsbury and Backley who designed this 4-point system and who defined the criteria by which somebody would qualify and not qualify?
Would the member give way?
I will give way.
Would the member agree that now is the time that the government actually needs to confirm what we're voting on? U-turn after U-turn, I believe members are confused.
I thank the honourable friend for his intervention. I will accept a government who listens and adapts and changes their approach in light of new evidence that is put before them. So I would congratulate the government for improving on the proposals. And I don't question the core intentions. I really don't. The waste and the unmanageable and welfare state and how it has been mismanaged for 14 years to lead us to this point absolutely must be assessed and improved. But it can't be at the expense of support to the most vulnerable in our society. The bill is moving on to carers, so it's not just disabled people that this bill will impact, but carers. It slashes 500 million from the carers allowance, the largest real terms cut since the benefit was introduced in 1976. Carers save this country tens of billions of pounds in unpaid labour. Nearly half of them already live in poverty. Is this really the thanks that they deserve? And it gets worse. If an existing claimant loses their PIP on reassessment, which happens all too frequently due to assessor errors, they will be treated as a new claimant and subject to the stricter rules. This includes anyone moving from DLA to PIP. It is punitive, it is regressive, and it will erode trust in the entire system. We are told there will be consultation, but what consultation happens when a bill is pushed through in a single week without adequate scrutiny or engagement with those most affected? The principle of nothing about without us has been flagrantly ignored. We've heard, according to Scope, that the extra cost of living with a disability is already nearly £1,100 a month. That is not covered by PIP. By 2029, this is expected to top £1,200. Yet under this bill, those same people will be expected to survive without the support that they rely on. The government expects disabled people to shoulder £15,000 a year in extra cost and offers them less and less. The public sees through this. Only 27% support these reforms. Nearly half of those surveyed believe they will worsen the health of disabled people, and over half expect more pressure on the NHS. These cuts will make people sicker, more isolated and more dependent on an already overstretched service. The politics of this is damning. This cannot be about politics. This must be about the people that we are here to serve. So please, 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 go back and wait for the consultation to be completed and integrate the learnings and the feedback from the people affected so that this bill and this legislation can actually make a positive contribution to our society and not a negative one. Thank you.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And Madam Deputy Speaker, let me begin by saying there's no denying the ideological austerity we've seen by the previous government for the last 14 years has led to absolute decimation of our services, devastation of our communities, and extreme poverty as well as an economic mess. So I get that this government has to make some extremely difficult decisions. But the central point in this debate is this: we cannot balance the books on the backs of some of the most vulnerable in our society. It's not the fair thing to do, it's not the right thing to do, and simply put, it is not the Labour thing to do. Madam Deputy Speaker, again today, many of us in good conscience, and let me say this, Madam Deputy Speaker, we do not on these benches who oppose this do not come from the same place as members opposite. We come from a place of sincerity. Members opposite on the Tory benches come from, again, political game playing. And we continue to come from that place of sincerity. But what is disrespectful, and continues to be disrespectful, to backbenchers in particular and members on this side, is the way we are piecemeal fed things. Even at this late stage, whilst I welcome the previous concessions and I welcome the concession today. But the reality is this. For months we have been talking about this, for months. And we could have been engaged in that process. We approached it with good faith. And again it makes a further mockery of a process that will result in hundreds of thousands of people being pushed into poverty. The timescale that we have been given already lacks respect that this democratic House should be afforded. But now, this piecemeal of information we are being leaked, frankly, we are being asked to rely on the goodwill of ministers. Now, I have the greatest deal of respect for honourable members. I have the greatest deal of respect. But we, as backbenchers, should be afforded the same dignity. Because we have all been elected on one premise. You know, my constituency of Bradford East suffers from some of the worst health inequalities, the worst child poverty. Over half of all children who live in my constituency are living in absolute poverty. I have to go back and face them. Yeah. The reality is, the bill as it stands today, regardless of what ministers tell us, the bill as it stands today is the same bill it was a week ago, the same bill it was when it was released. That's what we are voting on. We can discuss the concessions next week if this bill makes it.
Pull the bill.
But the bill today must be pulled.
Pull it.
Because I cannot go back to my constituency and tell them, through some concessions that were not in a bill, I voted for it, even though tomorrow this could add to deepening the poverty that people on my streets face. That is not what I was elected on. Madam Deputy Speaker, of course I will.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman, and he's making the correct and most powerful point, with that this is not the best way of making law, and it is hugely disrespectful to all sides of the House, irrespective of position. Would he also agree with me that that is compounded by the woefully inadequate time being set aside for committee consideration of this bill? Next week, and third reading, very truncated. We are all absolutely dizzy by the amount of U-turns and concessions. He is right. Much better to withdraw the bill, start again, bring it back in September.
Absolutely, and I'll come on to that point. I've already touched on the point in terms of a bill of this seismic nature. Let's be frank. I've spent a decade in this place. I've never seen a bill of this seismic nature with these direct consequences being rushed through in 1 week. And let's be clear, the House, this is a money, the motion that goes to the House of the Lords is going to be a money motion. It will not allow the House of Lords to make any amendments and bring this back. So again, the ministers have, of course I will.
Would it not be a very sensible way forward if the House simply passed the excellent reasoned amendment put forward by the Honourable Member for York, and we park the issue there, so we would then have the necessary consultation and preparation for a more effective bill?
I again say this. Courageous political leadership sometimes demands admitting we got it wrong. Like we did in the winter fuel allowance. Nobody out there, I mean, I sincerely think people respect you when you get something wrong and you come back. The concession after concession is admission enough that we have got this wrong. And my personal view remains that it is dignified today for the government to say we will go with the reasoned amendment and we will come back, we will go have meaningful consultation with disability groups, and then we will come back. And I again say everything I say out of absolute sincerity. And I want to finish by saying this, a point that's been made by honourable members on both sides of the House, because many are acting in good faith for the collective good of the people we represent. And the point is this: all of us will have to go back to our constituencies and justify the decision we make today. I have always promised my constituents in Bradford East that I will never vote for anything that will increase poverty, deprivation or deepen the health inequalities in my constituency. Because it is not this place that sends me to Bradford. It is the people of Bradford that sends me to this place, and I will remain true to them, and I will remain counted for them, and I will make sure that their voice is heard. I will be voting for the amendment, and I will be voting against the bill today.
David Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I say what an excellent and powerful speech to follow. We should all be here to stand up for the people who, the dignity of people who need us to stand up for them. I know what it means to become disabled. 11 years ago, I developed Guillain-Barré syndrome. It happens to 1 in 100,000 people, and unfortunately, I ended up totally paralysed for 3 months, and then fortunately made a full recovery over the next couple of years. And that was an insight into what it's like to become disabled. I went from full health to total dependence overnight and lost the ability to move for 3 months. Fortunately, I was lucky and I recovered. But I remember those early days very vividly, and what it was like to suddenly learn to live with a disability. I remember, for example, having to have some clicking contraption, a hook, to be able to grab my socks and get dressed in the morning. And that's one of those examples that's already been highlighted today of the extra costs and challenges that people living with disabilities face. Personal independence payments are a lifeline, and they enable people with disabilities and long-term health conditions to live independently, participate in society, and, crucially, stay in work if they can. Wales, Madam Deputy Speaker, will be hit hard by this proposal. In Wales, we have higher rates of long-term illness and disability. In rural areas, the cost of living with a condition is even higher. And these changes will hit hardest where communities and people are struggling to cope as it is. The government's so-called climb down does not fix this. Delaying the stricter criteria until 2026 does not make the policy fairer. It just creates a two-tier system. From 2026, someone newly diagnosed with a condition will not be entitled to the same support that someone with the same condition already receives today. I remember when I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, I was added to a Facebook group with lots of people who were had been struggling to live with the consequences of it, and they talked about how they coped. And clearly the people being added to that group today will be in an even worse situation, and that's quite frankly immoral. If the government was serious about trying to reduce the welfare bill, it would be focusing on fixing the issues in health and social care, tackling the root causes of chronic ill health, or providing good jobs across Wales. In Wales, Labour have been running the healthcare service for over 25 years. 800,000 people, that's almost a third of the entire population, are stuck on an NHS waiting list. And more than 9,000 people have been waiting over 2 years to start treatment. And that's hundreds of thousands of people who are unable to work as normal because they are languishing on waiting lists. There are so many people we know in Wales who are not getting the health care they need. And our welfare system as a whole was built by Welsh politicians, by Nye Bevan, David Lloyd George. In Wales, we know how to fight for each other, and we don't forget our roots, right? But they have. Right? It was shameful to see Welsh Labour politicians sitting there on the front bench. People in Wales will be disgusted by changes being made to disability benefits and PIP claimants that will make things harder for people with disabilities. Yes, of course, I'll give way.
Thank you. I thank the honourable member for giving way. On that note of tackling the root causes of illness and poor health, will the honourable gentleman agree with me that this substantial package of mental health support announced by the Welsh Labour government this weekend, including £5.6 million to tackle the long waiting list for children awaiting diagnosis for conditions such as ADHD and autism, is to be welcomed?
Hear, hear.
So I think we all know that a lot of this is political posturing, and that this bill is not going to fix the underlying problems we have in Wales. Right? Many of the problems we have in Wales are caused by the Conservatives closing down our industries 40 years ago. Right? And Wales has been waiting for a response since then. This isn't it. Picking on the vulnerable is what the Conservatives do, but it's not what the Welsh do. And that's why we voted them out last year. Do not punish people for getting sick. Do not divide disabled people into first and second-class citizens. Do not vote with the government today.
Paula Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start by saying how shocked I am that the Minister has just intervened near the end of this debate to say he will be removing the whole of Clause 5 from this bill. And whilst grateful for the concessions, this has further laid bare the incoherent and shambolic nature of this process. It is the most unedifying spectacle that I have ever seen. And as we have just heard, we are voting tonight on the bill as it stands on the order paper, not as amended. And I'm really, really sorry to say this, Madam Deputy Speaker, but when it's not written down, it's not worth the paper it's written on. We were promised a Hillsborough law by April this year, and nothing has come to fruition. So it is with sadness that... No, I won't. It's with sadness that I will vote for my honourable friend's reasoned amendment tonight, and I will vote against this bill. And I implore my government to do the right thing, to pause, to take a breath, and let us get this right. Because before entering Parliament, I served in local government, the trade union movement and working people my entire life. Service matters deeply to me, and I see it as my job to do exactly that as a Member of Parliament. I am a passionate believer in the dignity of labour, of secure, well-paid work being a route out of poverty towards opportunity and a life free from fear. And I regret to say that this bill will create poverty, and it has already induced fear. I think everyone in this House believes that we need reform in our welfare system, but we must be honest. This bill before us today is not reform. It is simply cuts, which have been brought forward to fill an economic black hole. In Liverpool City region, nearly 30% of residents are disabled, more than 10% above the national average. Liverpool also has one of the highest disability rates in the country, and our region already experiences some of the highest poverty rates in the UK. Even with concessions, this bill is still cuts, not reform, and will see 150,000 people pushed further into poverty and create a stark disparity in our welfare state for disabled people. And despite a commitment to co-production, there is nothing that commits the government to ensure the PIP assessment review findings has any bearing on this legislation. Over the last few weeks, we have heard a lot about lack of time to scrutinise legislation when debating another bill in this place. Yes, here we are, with a bill that has concessions which are not actually on the face of the bill, because there's been no time, and there will only be 8 days between second and third reading. That is truly a lack of time to scrutinise proposed legislation.
My honourable friend give way.
I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She makes a very good speech. But we are here as legislators, and would my honourable friend agree with me? The fact that we have been denied the opportunity to scrutinise denies us the opportunity to make this right for disabled people.
I thank my honourable friend for her excellent intervention, and I absolutely concur with her views. So, colleagues, we must be crystal clear on what we are voting for tonight. We are voting for the bill as it stands, unamended. The late changes combined with the compressed parliamentary timetable means MPs will have just a single day to debate and consider amendments. And the fact the bill is a money bill also means it will not be subject to amendments from the House of Lords. Our movement is at its best. Our movement at its best is the rising tide that lifts all boats. Not some, but all. I cannot, in good faith, look at my constituents of Liverpool Wavertree in the eye and tell them this bill would improve their lot, because quite frankly, it won't.
Anne Davies.
Madam Dirprwy Llefarydd. I've heard so much in this chamber today, some really passionate personal speeches, and I thank all honourable members for their testament and contribution. But the Universal Credit and Personal Independent Payment Bill is a direct attack on the ill and disabled people, and just to cut costs. The arbitrary restricting eligibility for PIP and cutting the health element on universal credit will have a devastating, lasting consequences. Whatever this Labour government claims, there is neither fairness nor compassion in its approach towards welfare. And it certainly isn't fair or compassionate for the people of Wales, who will be disproportionately impacted by these measures. And let me thank organisations, including Policy and Practice and the Bevan Foundation, for their vital work in filling absence of data for Wales, which this UK government has all but refused to provide. 4 out of 10 local UK authorities worst hit by these welfare cuts are in Wales, so 4 out of the 10. Impacting 6.1% of the Welsh population at a cost of £470 million for our communities. And in Carmarthenshire alone, the economic impact will be nearly £17.5 million. And too many people will suffer. My constituents will suffer. People like... By all means, yes.
And I thank the member given way. And there's just a point of clarification. She mentions her constituents suffering. The government has withdrawn Clause 5. But Clause 6 leaves all this legislation eligible to Northern Ireland. So is the government going to put a barrier down the Irish Sea in regards to PIP payment now?
Thank you. I'll allow the Minister to answer that in the closing statement. I couldn't possibly comment. But I will comment on Claire. She has several disabilities, including arthritis. She currently receives PIP, which has helped her build on her master's degree in equality and diversity in work, and allowed additional support, like the ability to have a carer accompany her when necessary. Ms Jacks does not have 4 points in any one part of the daily living component. Versus Arthritis has calculated that 79% of people that claim PIP in Wales for arthritis alone score fewer than 4 points, and that's nearly 17,000 people. And it's not just claimants. MENCAP, which has already been mentioned here, has estimated that over 13,000 carers may lose their carers allowance in Wales due to caring for people with fewer than 4 points. And the government's justification for this suffering is completely flawed. Joseph Rowntree Foundation finds that 60% of recipients scoring 4 or fewer points are already in employment in England and Wales, rising to 63% in my constituency of Caerfyrddin. The UK government claims its amendments to this bill will lessen the blow, but we'll have to wait until after the second reading to see them. that the government seems set to penalise people who become disabled after the arbitrary cut-off date of November 26. So can I ask the government what data has informed these concessions? Specifically, what evidence suggests that people can pick and choose when they become sick or become disabled? Because that, to me, looks like discrimination. Legal experts for the Equity Union agree that it could be unlawful on the grounds of arbitrariness. And arbitrariness looks half-baked in considering PIP assessment review, which will only be published in autumn 26. The UK Government's amendments to this bill do not address the fundamental injustice at the heart of these measures. And is plunging 150,000 people into poverty rather than the 250,000 really a marker of success? Is it only punishing people who will get ill or disabled in future, or those who turn 18 later, really a sign of a fair and compassionate welfare reform? I call on honourable friends across the House, particularly my friends opposite, to vote against this cruel bill tonight. The Labour UK Government must abandon these damaging plans entirely and instead create a welfare system founded on dignity, on equity, on compassion, that is developed with disabled people and representative organisation. Plaid Cymru will be voting for the reasoned amendment this evening submitted by my honourable friend from York Centre and against the second reading of this bill. John.
Diane Abbott.
Millions of disabled people will listen, view or read about this debate and its consequences and feel fear. Because for some members of the House, this is just an afternoon's political cut and thrust, but for the disabled, it is the rest of their lives. Members will have heard earlier that we should be concerned about the rising trajectory of welfare spending in this country. Ministers say this all the time. But what about the rising trajectory of tax avoidance or the rising trajectory of salaries in the City of London? Why must people on welfare bear all the opprobrium and have the money taken out of their pockets? We are the Labour Party and we have historically stood up against injustice. Why are we stepping away from this today? Anybody who has ever had anything to do with the welfare system knows that it needs reform. I deal month after month with dozens of people who are struggling with the welfare system. But it's not that people don't accept it needs reform. The problem is these reforms, which are unfair, ill thought out, and in the end, focused on saving money. And on the question of the personal independence payment, too many members talk about PIP as if it is too easy to claim that people are gaming the system or even engaged in some sort of scam. The truth is that PIP is generally not merely difficult to claim, but humiliating to claim, and any reform should deal with that. There are so many practical problems with this bill. It is being rushed in a week, which is ridiculous. There has been no formal consultation with the people whose lived experience it is concerned with. It is not a coincidence that not a single organisation which speaks to the disabled supports this legislation. And it will become law before two important reviews, one into PIP itself, the Timms review, and the Keep Britain Working review, will actually report. So these reviews, and in particular the Timms review, will actually be a dead letter. And because it is too late to change the face of the bill, members are being asked to vote purely on the basis of verbal assurances from ministers. None of us would come to an important arrangement with our council on the word of councillors. So, with all due respect, why are we expecting elected to vote for a law which will affect millions of people's lives and drives hundreds of thousands of people into poverty purely on the basis of what ministers claim they are going to do. I myself continue to oppose this bill on moral, legal and political grounds. And let me say this, there will be, as I said, millions of disabled people who will either watch this debate on the television, hear about it from their friends and family, or read about it in the newspaper. They will not be able to believe that the Labour Party is putting legislation through like this. Because, you know, if this legislation means anything at all, it means money coming out of the pockets of the disabled. Otherwise, what is the point of it? If you're going to save money in this financial year, disabled people have to lose money. It will be shocking to so many people listening and hearing about this, that Labour ministers are standing up and putting this through in order to hit Treasury targets. Even at this late stage, I urge colleagues to think about the people that put us here and withdraw this bill. It cannot be right that we have had a concession so late in the day, even in the course of the debate. If ministers were proud of this debate, if ministers were proud of what they're doing, concessions wouldn't be coming so late in the day. So, as I say, we should, even at this late stage, withdraw this bill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've been sitting here for about over 4.5, 5 hours, I think, and there's been so many changes and concessions. So many changes and concessions, I really don't know what we'll be voting for at the moment. And this is no way to bring such an important bill into this chamber for, when it's so important to people's lives. The Independent Alliance stand firmly against this bill because both it is unfair and unworkable, and no member of this House should, in any good conscience, vote for it. Of course, abuse of the welfare system is unacceptable, but we all agree on that. But this bill does not target fraud. What it does target is the most vulnerable and the most needy in our communities.
Welfare.
There's been some excellent contributions today, and very powerful contributions. And like everybody else here, I have constituents who have shared their story. Mine is of Joe, a constituent of mine in Leicester South. Joe is actively suicidal. All sharp objects and medications have been removed from his home. The only reason Joe is not in hospital is that there are no beds available. Yet Joe has been told she is not ill enough to qualify for personal independence payment under this system. Is this the kind of society we want to build? This bill is not just unfair, it is also unworkable. The government is asking members to vote for cuts now based on the promises that they will help people back into work in the future. Yet the supporting evidence from the Office for Budget Responsibility won't even be available until October. The process has been rushed, the consultation has been inadequate, and the system being proposed is truly simplistic. Scoring 4 points on a single activity will become the deciding factor whether somebody receives life-changing support. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, cutting disabled people's benefit won't magically create suitable jobs, especially in those areas of the country that have long had weaker jobs market. A disability that's close to my heart, which is visual impairment. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are 2 million people in this country living with a visual impairment. That is about to double by the year 2050. Yet 25% of employers would not be willing to make workplace changes, and 48% did not even have accessibility recruitment processes. And there's nothing addressing this issue. The government figures estimate that these changes will push approximately 150,000 people, including thousands of children, into poverty. There is no credible employment support plan for them. There is no guarantee that those whose conditions fluctuate will be treated fairly, and these changes will disproportionately punish people with mental health like Joe. Politics is not a game. We cannot balance the national budget on the backs of disabled people, and the public know this. I will be supporting the reason amendment by the Honourable Member for York Central, because this bill is simply unfair, even I'm not quite sure what it stands for at the moment. It is unworkable and it's unworthy of this House's support, and I urge all members to do the same. Thank you.
German. Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's safe to say that the topic of today's debate has been my overriding focus in recent months, and I want to thank my constituents and all organisations for their input, as well as the Secretary of State and the wider DWP team for listening to concerns and indeed acting on them with recent amendments. This bill will raise the Universal Credit Standard Allowance by the largest increase since the 1970s. It will help 3.9 million families with an average gain of £265 a year, bringing us closer, finally, to ensuring that every family can afford the essentials without relying on charity or community support. I wholeheartedly welcome this as part of the government's wider efforts to rebalance universal credit to better reward work and improve basic adequacy, along with an end to reassessment for those with the most severe conditions and to work capability assessments, the right to try work without the risk of losing existing entitlement, and crucial increased investment in health and into work pathways. But the undeniable focus of this bill has been changes to personal independence payment. I truly thank my Clwyd North constituents for their time and their trust in sharing their stories. To them, I say I hear you and will continue to represent you. So many have been desperately worried.
750,000 low-paid, sick and disabled people will lose universal credit help payment, cost them £3,000 on average. That's £2 billion worth of cuts, even after what the Minister just said. If the government wants to change it, pull it and start again. Because I know how frightened disabled people must be watching this tonight about the bill we have in front of us and the shambles. How can I look them in the eye and tell them they're wrong? Because the truth is, this bill is an absolute shambles. It's immoral. It's been rewritten on the fly. Policies affecting millions and millions of disabled lives are being made up as we go within this chamber in the last couple of hours. We are being asked to vote on a bill as legislators without full impact assessments, without proper scrutiny, without even knowing what the final version will be. How can we vote for something so absolutely consequential for so many people in our constituencies across the country without the data, without the analysis, without everything we need as legislators to make informed decisions? But what we do know is devastating. The government's own figures say this bill will push at least 150,000 more people into poverty, 100,000 more people into absolute poverty. It will create a cruel, two-tier welfare system where support depends not on need, but on when someone was assessed. That is just not unworkable. Not just unworkable, it's absolutely morally indefensible. Deputy Madam Speaker, some votes define us in here. They reveal who we are and who and what we stand for. This, tonight, is one of those votes. And I say especially to colleagues on my own benches, do not ignore the voices of the people who need us most. Stand with them. Stand on the right side of history. Vote against this bill and hold your head up high.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Well. Donald.
I was pleased yesterday to hear the Secretary of State acknowledge the anxiety of disabled people in her comments from the dispatch box. And I think if we really want to understand why changes like this cause such anxiety and fear in the disabled population, than really just sit and listen to the speech that was completely without empathy from the Leader of the Opposition at the start of this debate. Absolutely. Areas like the northeast of England, where over decades industry has declined, are the same places that have the highest levels of poverty, poor health outcomes, and consequently the highest need for social welfare support. The member for Salisbury talked about the lack of productive capacity. Well, I can tell him it was successive Conservative governments that stripped the productive capacity out of seats like mine, which is why a former Director of Public Health in Stockton North, Professor Peter Kelly, when asked what would be the best way to improve the health of our residents, said that it will be for everyone who can to have a secure, well-paid job that they like doing. We see it time and again. A physical health condition is left untreated due to long NHS waiting lists. The resulting inactivity leads to musculoskeletal problems, which turns to isolation, anxiety and depression. And often our benefit system compounds that hurt, forcing people to prove and reprove their disability, creating a climate of doubt and rather than dignity. And I'm pleased to see that this bill will address that by removing the need for reassessment and protecting existing claimants. I'd like to thank the Disability Minister and the other ministers for listening to me when I've raised the concerns of my constituents. There have been some really meaningful concessions on this bill: the protection of existing claimants, support for new claimants, inflation proofing of annual increases. But actually the withdrawal of Clause 5, and particularly the TIMS review of the PIP assessments, the Disability Minister knows has been a major concern for me, and I was pleased to hear that this evening. But I am also concerned about mental health, made worse by debt and unemployment. And I welcome the government's investment in expanding access to occupational health and the almost 7,000 new mental health workers since last July. These aren't just policies, they're the foundations for a healthier and, I think, a more hopeful society. Now, we've heard a lot this evening about work, about this party's commitment to work, about the purpose and dignity it offers and the improvement in mental resilience. But I want to be clear, there is a value judgment behind this. But it's not a value judgment that chooses to separate those people in work versus those who aren't. People's lives have equal value regardless of whether they work. But work does in and of itself improve the quality of people's lives. It's... okay, yeah,
Honourable Member for Giving Way, who's giving a passionate speech about our region. Does the Honourable Member agree with me that for too long the place of work has not been disability friendly, and lots of people would like to contribute, and my experience as a trade unionist, I've seen time and time again people managed out of the workplace despite it being illegal who really did need the support and wanted to be in work, and they told me that they were bullied out of the workplace because of the weak reasonable adjustments clause.
I do agree that accessibility to work is important, both through buildings and also transport and access to work as well. It's not just about supporting people to get into work, but whether they're physically able to get into work as well. I absolutely do agree with that. So to reiterate, people's lives have equal value regardless of whether they work. And it's our duty to ensure that as many people as possible are supported into that secure, purposeful, well-paid work, and to ensure also that employers satisfy their duty to make the necessary adjustments for people with disabilities. My honourable friend, the member for Norwich South, outlined some things the government are doing to try and reduce unfairness. I would add to that investments in our NHS, which will help deal with people's long-term health problems, and the employment support measures announced by the government, which will offer a pathway to work. The Employment Rights Bill and the Industrial Strategy will create more opportunity for work. I also want to speak directly to those people who may never return to work. They deserve dignity and they deserve unconditional support. They offer more to society than previous governments have ever recognised. This is now the time to turn a page on Conservative governments that treated claimants with suspicion, and to work hard to build trust with actions rather than words. I'd just like to conclude by quoting a few words I heard on the Today programme last week from the former Welfare Minister, Lord Blunkett, when he said that Labour is the party of supporting people into work, not the party of keeping people on benefits. I've got faith in the intrinsic value of everyone in our society and their ability to contribute. And I think so long as the voices of disabled people continue to be held and that they're heard and that they remain at the table, then I do think that the government's plan for changing the country will enable everyone to thrive regardless of their ability. Thank you.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've got to say I'm absolutely amazed at what's happened just even this afternoon. I'm, like many people in this place, being absolutely ignored at anything I've ever had to say with regard to this bill. This bill was published a few months ago, and very little consultation, if any, has taken place. Tell you what, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been here nearly 15 years. I've never once seen a massive commitment given in a bill like my honourable friend, right honourable friend, the Minister gave in an intervention, in a contribution. This is crazy, man. This is outrageous, man. This bill isn't fit for purpose. If you have a look at 16 pages, I can ask a right honourable gentleman to rip the ones out now. That's changed. There would only be 2 pages left. Withdraw the bill. Discuss the contents of the... We're only that far, you know, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're only that far with the commitments that have been given by the front bench on some sort of satisfactory bill which everybody could get behind. I think if we had another hour or 2, we could have voted on something which we all would have agreed with, instead of this hodgepodge of a bill which means nothing to nobody. Madam Deputy Speaker, I might seem terribly cross, and that's because I am. It's because we're discussing, you know, the lives of millions of disabled people who live in our constituencies. Not one of them, you know, voted, regardless of what party anybody, not one of them voted for their representative to come here and reduce the PIP payments or reduce any payments that they receive disabled people. And I think, you know, what we've got to remember, it's not just disabled people, you know. It's people who are sick, people who are ill, people who one day have been absolutely fine and because of possibly an industrial accident, because of some sort of illness, the next day they lost the capacity to earn any finances whatsoever. No, the bill as it stood, the bill as it actually still stands, I should say, means that there will or there would be a 2-tier system. It isn't any good trying to argue the cheat in here, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there wouldn't be a 2-tier system, because if somebody with a condition gets paid money and support one day to a level, and then the next day, because of a date on a calendar, that support is less than the other person. Now, I'm happy to give way to anyone to tell me how that isn't a 2-tier system, how that isn't unfair to somebody who might have paid the tax and national insurance for many, many years. People who are sitting at home now, who aren't ill, who aren't poorly, who haven't got a serious condition. But I'll tell you what, come November next year, if this continues the way it's on the face of the bill, come November next year, there'll be a whole number of people that could fall in the bracket the day after the introduction of the bill. That can't be fair, man. It just isn't fair. And I'm speaking with good colleagues here. I think we've had a very difficult time. Everybody's had a rough time here over the past few weeks. We want to see a resolution to this. We understand that there's a huge expense involved. We understand the black hole that we received once we got into power. But people didn't vote for the Labour Party's change to be a change for the worse. They really had some faith, you know. They had some faith in the Labour Party. I've still got a little bit of faith left. It's draining out of us. It's draining out of my constituents. We need to restore that faith. We need to make sure that people really understand what change we mean and what we meant at the time of the election. We need to, Minister, we need to look after people. We need to look after not just the sick and the disabled, but everyone else in this country. That's what change means.
Darren Paffy.
Thank you, Speaker. And I speak as a signatory of the first reasoned amendment tabled by my honourable friend for Hackney South and Shoreditch, because I recognised, as many did across this House, that there were serious problems with the original version of this bill. Welfare reform that we all believe in has to be fair, it has to be compassionate, it has to be grounded in evidence. And that bill, as first published, I'm afraid failed on all three counts. So I do want to acknowledge that there have been significant and welcome changes, and I genuinely thank ministers for meeting with me and for listening. We all know that scrapping or reducing PIP for people who are already in work was always the wrong target. It's one that risked making employment harder, not easier, and it's for many disabled people. And it's right that current recipients of PIP, it's over 7,000 in my Southampton Itching constituency, will now be protected. If we're to avoid repeating the mistakes of this recent period, we do need a proper process for consultation and co-production. Ministers have said that they will now do this through the Timms review, and that's the right vehicle. I welcome another concession around the £300 million of employment support that is being brought forward. In my view, that should have always been front and centre to this. But intentions alone are not enough. And while I welcome the removal of Clause 5, introducing no changes before Tim's reports, I am concerned that it remains open-ended. So I'm happy to give way. Yeah.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and I too welcome the commitment that was given from the dispatch box to the removal of Clause 5. But I wonder if the honourable gentleman will share my hope that when the Minister sums up this evening, he can categorically state that those people grandfathered in today, which is to help get past that Clause 5 moment in the bill, will still be grandfathered in without Clause 5 and despite whatever comes out of the Timms review, so that they're not put back into the pool of potentially being reassessed in the future.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And my honourable friend makes an important point that I do hope the Minister will confirm. There are other assurances that many of us would like to hear from the dispatch box today, and that includes a defined timetable for the report. So I wonder if the Minister would, in wrapping up, confirm that November 2026 is now no longer a relevant date at all. I'm glad that we will now avoid the absurd situation of having potentially 3 different assessment regimes running in parallel. What has been announced will, I hope, give clarity to claimants and will, I hope, in good faith, demonstrate that the government is serious about doing reform properly. I will happily give way.
If November 2026 is not a hard deadline anymore, why are the government needing to push this bill through today? Why is it got to get through before the summer recess in order that it can go to the Lords, in order that it can be in place before November 2026, when that date no longer matters?
I mean, most of the answer to that question is obviously a matter for the Minister, but actually I don't want to delay the uplift in universal credit, so I am willing to vote that through today. We do understand the catastrophic financial mess that we inherited, but we have to underscore that abstract OBR dogma means nothing to our constituents who have been worried these last few weeks. There must be a willingness from government, from the dispatch box today, to rebuild that trust. Reform has to start with the right foundations, with investment in the NHS to help people become work ready, with a renewed access to work scheme, with better job centre support, with the right to try, and with employer engagement. These are all good measures, all have my full support. I welcome, as I've just said, the uprating of universal credit, the scrapping of the work capability assessment, and the additional support that's been promised to those who cannot work and will never be expected to. These are important steps in restoring fairness and dignity to the social security system. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, in supporting this bill today, and it was, work out how we got to this situation, but it was a last-minute decision, it does not mean I give the government a blank cheque. I, like many across this House, will be watching very closely as the next stage unfolds. I still believe that the next stage is rushed, but we are where we are. I will still consider, if necessary, opposing the bill at third reading if the commitments today are not delivered in the coming week. That is not a position I enjoy being in, and anyone who thinks it's easy to be in that position doesn't know what they're talking about. In constituencies like mine, in Southampton Itchen, we know the difference that a fair and functioning welfare system can make, and the damage that's done when it fails. That's why we have to avoid the same makes that the last Conservative government did. We all remember, indeed casting our minds further back, the Conservative and Liberal Democrat coalition's litany of failure on welfare reform, the bedroom tax, ATOS doing reassessments. I accompanied my mum to her reassessment. She was a nervous wreck because that was an absolute disaster of a scheme. We'll remember the great sanctioning machine known as the work programme. This Labour government has different values to that, and we must demonstrate them. So there is a great opportunity here today. Commit to a clear timetable for the review so that people can rebuild that trust in what's about to happen. Convince us as a House that the review will be meaningful co-production. Set out what employment support will come with that £300 million that's being brought forward. Because if the bill passes today by the government's own rushed agenda, in my view, it has 1 week to get this bill into shape. If we get the system right, we will have a reformed welfare system that delivers on the government's objectives to support people who can work into work, with dignity and prosperity for them, and yes, it will ensure the sustainability of the welfare system. So let's build, I'm coming to a conclusion, let us build a system, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is sustainable, but above all, one that is just and fair.
Kelly Foy. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I speak today on behalf of the hundreds of desperate people in Durham and beyond, as well as the dozens of organisations who contacted me with concerns about this bill. And I'm sure many members across the House will agree that there is a need to reform the social security system and support people to stay in and back into work, not least those of us in areas that have been decimated over the last 3 decades. Now, we've been told that this review of PIP is to ensure that the benefit is fair and fit for the future, and that the review will be co-produced with disabled people and the organisations that represent them. But what's fair about us being asked to vote on changes when the terms of reference of this review were only announced yesterday? And Madam Deputy Speaker, I popped out for a banana earlier on, and when I came back in, things had changed again. So I'm even more unclear on what I'm voting on. Now, as we've heard, these proposals are so unfair. They'll create a two-tier system of social security. If you fell ill earlier this year, you've got the support you've always had. But woe betide those people who will fall ill later this year or next year. How can we be asked to vote for a system that, rather than penalising everyone for being ill, has now been tweaked to only penalise people based on when they got ill? Or in fact, when they get more ill, as anyone reporting a change in the circumstances will be caught up in these changes. And every organisation that I've spoken to, including at my recent expert roundtable event in Durham, agrees that the changes to PIP will have a bigger impact on the North East than almost any other region in the country. This isn't a level playing field. The scale of ill health in the North is 50% higher than it is in the South. The North East has a higher rate of people living with a disability than any other region. And the Ageing in the North report, recently published by the Northern Health Science Alliance and Health Equity North, suggests that in the South, people leaving the job market later on in life overwhelmingly retire. In the North, they leave due to ill health. So the impact that these changes will have on individuals, Communities and the economy in the North East are huge, regardless of any recent concessions. And again, we're being asked to vote on proposals before any meaningful consultation with disability charities and organisations have taken place, and without a regional impact assessment being carried out. And let's remember, PIP is an in-work benefit. For many, it provides them with support they need to actually stay and work. If they're caught up in the changes or claim after they've been introduced, it will be much harder for them to stay and work. Now, if we vote for this bill, we'll be knowingly leaving vulnerable people without the support they need to live dignified, independent lives free from poverty, when we should be supporting and championing the rights of disabled people, their carers and their families. And as a parent of my daughter Maria, who lived her life with a severe disability, I empathise with all those who are unlikely to undertake meaningful or secure employment because of the disability, and experience the dignity that so many people in work do experience. But surely, just because someone cannot contribute economically to society, they still deserve dignity. They still deserve to be treated with respect and to feel a value in society, no matter how they are able to contribute. And I joined the Labour Party 30 years ago to be on the side of the poor and the weak. This bill penalises those with the weakest shoulders. That's not what I was elected for, and that's not what this Labour government was elected for. So I plead with colleagues again, pause this process, start again, and do it the right way, and do it the Labour way.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful to be called in this debate. I think every member of this House will agree that welfare needs reform. I think about the constituent who was told in a PIP assessment, who was asked, how long have they been autistic? I think about other stories which are close to here, which I cannot repeat because they are not my stories alone to tell. The words come easily. The path to reform is harder. And I think a lot of us have walked that hard path in recent weeks. We've all heard many points made in this debate, and I would just like, in the short time available, to respond to some of them. A number of members have said, and I think sincerely suggested, that there is something inherently wrong about creating a system where people's treatment depends on the date of application. But I'd ask, how many people in this chamber who have been a negotiator or a trade union member have voted for an agreement that involved red banding a particular rate of pay? I think every representative of every party that has served in government has passed into legislation cut-off points. I remember leaving school around the time that the statement system in special educational needs started to be phased out in favour of EHCPs. And those consequences are with us to this day. I wanted to respond as well to a point made, I think, by honourable friend, the member for Bradford East, when he said that we are being asked to place trust in ministers, and in particular the right honourable member for East Ham, the Disability Minister. And over the course of many discussions in recent weeks, I have to say that I do have that trust. And I know that many members on this side do have that personal trust, and to know that that review is now going to be co-produced with disabled people and disabled people's organisation is a real and material change. Madam Deputy Speaker, in this current age of snap judgments, when we are expected to respond immediately to every manner of change, and when politics in public is rewarded more highly than the politics carried out in private, the party system, perhaps, is not in a good state of repute. But I know that many members, and I'm one of them, have wrestled with their individual concerns and that desire to have collective discipline without which there is no party and there is no programme and nothing would ever get done. These are good and honourable principles to have. They must be moderated by willingness to listen, and however it came about, people have listened today. The changes that have been made, ministers will know and officials will know, have been the subject of many long and at times difficult conversations. But to have a bill in front of us now which removes that problem which was critical to many of us of a change beginning next November before that review was completed has been addressed. We are in the business of making material change for the people we represent, and I think about the 10,037 PIP recipients in my constituency, the perhaps 1,000 DLA recipients more, and the many more family members who will have the ease of mind of knowing that the changes that we have made in this place means that their income and their security in life is being protected. Now, this bill has still some way to go over the course of the next week, but we must recognise progress when it has happened. I want to thank everyone in my constituency who has contacted me and taken the time to meet in all those discussions with officials, with ministers. I don't wish to deny another member a chance to speak. All those representations were helpful. They did make a difference. I am so grateful to everyone who shared their story, and I will be voting for this bill tonight.
Well, we have run out of time, and I call the Shadow Minister, Helen Whately.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This has been an extraordinary afternoon in this chamber. Listening to this debate, surely all of us have been moved by the stories we've heard of honourable members' own experiences, the experience of their families and loved ones and of their constituents, of how the welfare system has served its vital purpose of providing a safety net in times of desperate need, particularly for people whose disabilities or ill health have made it impossible for them to make ends meet on their own. It is clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there is a broad consensus across the House that the welfare system needs reform. There has also been a consensus that what we were debating today was a bad bill. It was a rushed and chaotic compromise that would harm disabled people, create a two-tier benefit system and barely make a dent in the overall welfare bill. How could anyone justify voting for something that would not make a single disabled person's life better? It's clear that many members couldn't. And I say it was a bad bill because while we've been here debating it, the bill has more or less disintegrated. Less than 2 hours ago, the Social Security Minister told us in an unprecedented intervention that Clause 5 of the bill is to be removed at the committee stage. That takes out all the changes to personal independence payments and with it almost the entirety of the remaining savings in the bill. Describing this as chaos now feels like an understatement. Here we have a government with a super majority voted in on a manifesto for change, a welfare system which everyone agrees needs reform, and public finances which simply must be brought under control. But the government is now serving up a bill with next to nothing in it. They had already U-turned once. It seems they can't even deliver a U-turn. The Prime Minister told the country that he was distracted at NATO. He flew back home on Thursday to sort the problem out. This is what sorting it out looks like. Once again, his calamitous negotiations are letting the country down. Last week, we offered him help in the national interest. We set out 3 tests that he would need to meet for our support on welfare legislation. The first was that the welfare bill must come down. All of us know people whose lives would not be possible without the help that our welfare system provides. Each and every one of us in this chamber wants a welfare system which is there for those who need it. But the fact is that if the welfare bill spirals out of control, it puts that support in jeopardy. But this bill now makes no meaningful changes to a system that we all agree isn't working. It will now save, I reckon, less than £1 billion from a sickness benefits bill rising to nearly £100 billion by the end of the decade. This is a total dereliction of duty by a government that claims to want welfare reform and fiscal discipline. Secondly, we said we would support plans that get people into work, but this bill won't help a single person into work. Ministers have said, trust us, employment support is coming. But why would anyone trust this government on jobs when 100,000 were lost in May alone? And none of us have actually seen the government's plan to get more disabled people into work. Apart from new red tape and making it more expensive to hire people, I don't think there is one. And thirdly, we said we must not have more tax rises in the autumn. Given that the Chancellor had already committed to this, it should have been the simplest of those three conditions to agree to. But now this desperate climb down blows an even bigger hole into her budget. She is pushing us into a doom loop of higher taxes, fewer jobs, more welfare and higher taxes. At this rate, the time is coming when our constituents won't even have a welfare system to call on in times of trouble. Madam Deputy Speaker, what is there left for us to vote for or against this evening? All of us in this House know that welfare needs reform. All of us in the House want to see more people helped into work, and all of us in this House, or surely most of us at least, recognise that the country must live within its means. The remnants of this bill will manifestly achieve none of this. In fact, the only purpose it will now serve is to etch forever into the statute book the moment when this government totally lost control.
I call the Minister, Minister Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've had a passionate and eventful debate. We have heard, Madam Deputy Speaker, the concerns, and the government will amend the bill, as my right honourable friend and I have set out. But the system we've inherited does not work. Uniquely in the G7, our employment rate is still less than before the pandemic. Every other G7 country has got back to where it was before or better, but we haven't. And the system is trapping hundreds of thousands of people needlessly in low income and inactivity. The system tells people they cannot work, for many of whom it is simply untrue. We have to change it. I'll gladly give way to Michael.
I'm sorry to come in so early in this peroration, but we have limited time. Could we have the assurance that the concession that's been given this evening with regard to the Timms review, that the outcome and recommendations of the Timms review will be in primary legislation and not delegated legislation?
Well, I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. And let me just say a little bit about the announcement I made in my intervention on my honourable friend, the member for Peterborough, earlier on. So we've listened to the concerns that have been expressed in the debate, specifically about the new 4-point threshold being implemented before the outcome of my review. So, as I've said, we will, in fact, now move straight to my review, only make changes to PIP eligibility activities and descriptors following that review. We will table... I will give way, yeah.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Can I ask the Minister to confirm at the dispatch box that clause 5, specifically referencing the need for claimants to score 4 points in order to receive the daily living allowance, will be removed from the bill?
Yes, I can confirm to my honourable friend that that is the case. And we will table the amendment to do that. And let me also say, and answer the honourable member from South Antrim, who raised this point perfectly properly in the debate, that we will also remove the parallel provisions for Northern Ireland. Now, he suggested that would mean removing clause 6. It doesn't mean that, because there's a lot of other things in Schedule 2, which is referenced in Clause 6. It's Section 4 of Schedule 2, which addresses the points that we're dealing with. Let me just make a little further progress, Madam Deputy Speaker. And actually, I still haven't quite answered the intervention that my right honourable friend, the question that he put to me in the first place. And this question about whether the review, the outcome of the review, will be implemented in primary or secondary legislation does depend on the outcome of the review and the form of the assessment that we take forward. And we'll come back to that. We will come back to that when we've concluded the review. Let me make a little bit of headway before I intervene again. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, under the last Labour government, in the 12 years up to 2010, the disability employment gap fell steadily. In 2010, as soon as the Tories and the Lib Dems took over and scrapped the New Deal, it stopped falling and has barely shifted since. What this bill opens up is the chance once again for proper support into work for people out of work on health and disability grounds. We will provide that again, recognising that with, for example, far more mental health problems amongst young people, the needs post-pandemic will be different from the past. I listened with great interest to the powerful speech that my honourable friend, the member for Stockbridge and Penistone, made, calling for a target for the disability employment gap. I think she makes a strong argument, and that's the kind of approach that we need to develop as we bring forward our plans for employment support. So the bill opens that, I won't give away at the moment, the bill opens that possibility up. It deals with work disincentives inserted by the previous government into universal credit. The current system forces people to aspire to be classified as sick in order to qualify for a higher payment, and once so classified, it abandons them. We've got to change it. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way, and the House knows that he is not only an honourable man, but he has spent the largest proportion of his parliamentary career looking at these issues. He must surely understand, however, that the confusion which has been expressed in this place is now being felt and expressed in the country at large. I have never seen a bill butchered and filleted by their own sponsoring ministers in such a cack-handed way. Nobody can understand the purpose of this bill now. In the interests of fairness, simplicity and natural justice, is it not best to withdraw it, redraft it and start again?
No, Madam Deputy Speaker. And let me tell him one of the things that the bill does. Part of the problem is it is very hard to bring up a family on the standard allowance of universal credit. The Tories reduced the headline rate of benefit to the lowest real terms rate for 40 years. Families have to rely on food banks. People aim to be classified as sick for the extra benefit. The system should not force people into that position. It needs to be fixed, and the bill makes very important changes in that direction. Let me give way to the honourable.
Thank the Minister. I had to come here today with the intention of voting against the government on this bill. I have to say that when it comes down to the removal of Clause 4, which everyone at home I'm sure will be delighted to know, so Clause 5, which I'm sure everyone at home will be delighted to know completely withdraws PIP from the scope of this bill and consequently there's nothing to vote on. But could the Minister give me some comfort by confirming whether or not the Timms review is going to be taking place within a spending envelope?
Minister.
What I can assure him is that the review is not intended to save money. That is not the purpose of the review. The review is to get the assessment right and to make sure we've got an assessment which will, for the future. I need to make a little more progress, because as a number of members have highlighted in the debate, my honourable friend, the member for Clwyd North, my honourable friend, the member for Southampton Itchin, a key step in this bill is the first ever permanent real terms increase in the standard allowance of universal credit. Actually, it's the first permanent real terms increase in the headline rate of benefit for decades. And the Tory party, of course, is against it. They froze benefits time and again. They created these work disincentives and mass dependence on food banks, which this government is determined now to address. And we are, of course, concerned as well that the future cost increases of personal independence payment should be sustainable. And let me just look back on the record of that. PIP cost the then government in the year before the pandemic, 2019-20, at today's prices, £12 billion. Last year, it cost £22 billion. And we want the system to be sustainable for the future, and that is extremely important because many people with large costs arising from ill health or disability do depend on PIP. They need to be confident that the support will be there in the future as well. I'll give way to him.
The Minister for giving way. He's doing an admirable job of defending the farcical today. Can I ask him, last week there were £5 billion worth of savings. Today there were £2.5 billion worth of savings, and then he came to the dispatch box and did 3 more U-turns. How much today, when he stands at that dispatch box, will these new measures save the taxpayer?
Minister.
We'll set out those figures in the usual way. But let me, on personal independence payment, let me make this point. The last government wanted to change personal independence payment from cash to vouchers. They wanted to take independence out of personal independence payment. We oppose them. It's been suggested that the benefit should be frozen, but the costs which the benefit is contributing to are continuing to rise along with all the other costs. So we oppose that as well. Some argue for means testing, but disability imposes costs irrespective of income. We reject all of those. Let me just make a comment about the concern that has been expressed, which doesn't arise now, given what I've announced, but about a two-tier system. And actually, a two-tier system is completely normal in social security. PIP replaced DLA in 2013, but 500,000 adults are still on DLA today. That doesn't cause problems. Parallel running is normal, and actually is often the fairest way to make a major change. I'll give way to Mike.
Very good.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, and I think members on this side of the House really do appreciate the concessions that he has already made. But when he's talking about whether this will be put in primary legislation, he must understand that members on this House will not be able to amend it if it is not in primary legislation. And that is a key concern when we don't know the outcome of the review.
Minister.
My honourable friend, my answer to him is the one that I gave earlier. We will need to await the outcome of the review, the assessment which is developed in the review, and to determine whether it will be implemented in primary or secondary legislation. So I want to make some further headway, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend, the member for York Central, in her opening speech, drew attention to the fact that she and I had known each other for a long time, and that's absolutely correct. And she urged us to listen to the voices of our constituents. So in February, someone I hadn't met before came to my constituency surgery. He explained to me that he lost his arm, aged 6, in a road accident. And as a result, leaving school at 16, he could not find a job. He tried really hard. He couldn't find an employer that would take him. Until, in the year 2000, somebody told him about the New Deal for disabled people. And they did find him a job. He then worked for 23 years without a break, a whole series of different jobs. He brought up his children, he paid his taxes, until in October 2023, he was in an unsatisfactory 0-hours job, and he left it. And to his dismay, he hasn't been able to find a job since. He came to me as his local MP to ask where to get help again, like he had from the New Deal. But unfortunately, it was all scrapped by the Tories and the Lib Dems after 2010. we are determined now to provide proper support again. And my right honourable friend yesterday announced further early funding for that support. No, I'm not. I won't be giving way again. The Tories were never really interested in the disability employment gap. They had a brief flirtation in the 2015 general election campaign when David Cameron suddenly announced a target to halve the gap. Unfortunately, as soon as that general election had been safely won, that target was immediately scrapped, and they reverted to type. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we do care about disability employment. That is what we are making changes to address, and in this bill, we're making the changes to deliver.
Order. The original question was that the bill be now read a second time, since when an amendment has been proposed, as on the order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. As many of their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Petition. Clear the lobby. Colleagues should be seated and silent. The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. The tellers for the ayes are Clive Lewis and Andy MacDonald, and the tellers for the no are Keir Mather and Kate Dearden.
The ayes to the right, 149. Whoa. The noes to the left, 328.
The ayes to the right, 149. The noes to the left, 328. The noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Of the contrary, no? No! End the lobbying. Colleagues should be seated and quiet. Seated and quiet. The question is as on the order paper. As many in that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. The tellers for the ayes are Kate Mather and Kate Dearden. And tellers for the noes are Gregory Stafford and Harriet Cross. Order, order.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 260.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 260. So the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Unlock. Point of order, Ms Wade. Is it really relevant to business right now? Point of order, Helen Wakesley.
Madam Deputy Speaker, please could you advise, in the light of the shambles of this afternoon, the fact that this bill has been ripped apart literally in front of our eyes in this chamber, and that the Government Minister cannot even tell us how much it is now going to save, can you please advise whether this should still be rushed through to be debated next week here at committee stage, or whether the Government should in fact withdraw this bill?
The honourable member has put her point on the record, and the honourable member has been a minister in the past, so she will know the scheduling of business is a matter for government and not for the chair. Programme motion to be moved formally.
Formally.
The question is as on the order paper. As many that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
Embarrassing.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it. I don't need chuntering on the sidelines. Money resolution to be moved formally.
Formally.
The question is as on the order papers. Many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. I now go on to motion number 5 on prisons. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order papers. Many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no.
No.
The division is deferred until tomorrow. Motion number 6 on electricity. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order papers. Many of the opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. I now go on to presentation of public petitions. Petition Liam Byrne.
Thank you all. See you in 10 minutes.
Can the colleagues leave the chamber in an orderly fashion and quietly?
See you later.
Presentation of public petitions. Petition Liam Byrne.
Very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to present this petition on behalf of the residents of Water-Orton Road in Castle Bromwich in my constituency. And this petition calls on Solihull Council to finally take action to tackle the out-of-control speeding on the slip road off the Water-Orton Road. Because while Solihull Council's intentions to tackle speeding on the main Water-Orton Road was admirable, I'm afraid it's unfortunately diverted the problem to the slip road. And this has made life for many of my constituents a misery, with resident Helen Rogers telling me that inconsiderate, selfish drivers are leaving locals intimidated and frightened for their safety. So let us not wait until there is a fatality. We must take action immediately. Madam Deputy Speaker, the petitions therefore request that the House of Commons urge the Government to work with Solihull Council to implement traffic calming measures on the slip road off Water-Orton Road following a spate of road traffic incidents, and the petitioners remain, etc.
Petition traffic calming measures on the slip road off Water-Orton Road.
She's grateful for your service.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. And I call Jess Brown-Fuller on infant feeding. Jess Brown-Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is a pleasure to bring this adjournment debate to the Chamber on a topic that is close to my heart, and I refer members to my register of interests as the chair of the APPG on infant feeding. And I am pleased, as always, to see the Minister in her place, and I look forward to her response on behalf of this government, just days before the long-awaited 10-year plan for the NHS. When the Secretary of State for Health promised to create the healthiest generation ever, it was a bold and admirable ambition, and certainly one that I share with him. Every child deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their wealth or their postcode. When this government talks of building a better future for children, their policies and schemes often start with school, with free school meals and breakfast clubs, or providing government support for nurseries and early years settings. But there is very little substance in the critical years from birth to 3, and even less when it comes to policy around infant feeding, whether that is breastfeeding, formula feeding, or a combination of the two. Now, I had my son nearly 11 years ago, and I remember with fondness the lactation consultant coming onto the ward in the maternity unit and showing me how best to hold my son to feed him and what to expect in the first few weeks after taking him home. And I did not have an easy journey with breastfeeding, suffering with pain when he latched. I had multiple bouts of mastitis, swelling, and the list went on. My husband and I ran our own restaurant at the time, so he took approximately 3 hours of paternity leave before returning to work. I'll happily give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend, and I'm grateful to her for the work that we're doing together on the APPG for infant feeding and all her passion in this space. Madam Deputy Speaker, breastfeeding is a full-time job. Only last week, Carrie Johnson, the wife of one of our former Prime Ministers, highlighted how easy it is to neglect your own needs as a mother while breastfeeding. Does my honourable friend agree with me that it's essential that this government establish 6 weeks of paid paternity leave so that breastfeeding mothers can focus on feeding their baby and partners can focus on looking after mum?
Yeah. I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I was so pleased to see the statement in the House earlier today, and I know that she's been a tireless advocate for making sure that parental leave for all parents is improved dramatically, and I thank her for her advocacy in that area. Happily give way to my honourable friend.
Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Chichester? I spoke to her beforehand. In the last term of Parliament, one of the Scots Nats MP was chair of this organisation, this APPG. I was supportive of that as a man. I thought it was important, and my wife was an example of where breastfeeding is so important. But is the Honourable Lady aware that Northern Ireland scored the highest 69.5 out of 100 between UK nation comparisons? And this may be because Northern Ireland has already put policies in place and is the only nation to have completed updated resources on infant feeding and HIV, giving Northern Ireland the top score. So would the Honourable Lady not urge with me the Northern Ireland Health Trust to share best practice with the other devolved nations, with the Minister here, to help encouragement of breastfeeding for those mothers who are able to do so?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and he's absolutely right that Northern Ireland scored the highest on the report card format on the World Breastfeeding Trends Initiative, which I will come on to. England scored a paltry less than 50 in comparison to Northern Ireland's score, and that was very much due to the fact that England scored 0 when it comes to infant feeding and HIV. Happily give way on that point.
Thank you, and thank you to the Honourable Member for bringing this adjournment debate on such an important topic. She spoke of some of the difficulties that she had at the start of her breastfeeding journey, which is something that my partner Catherine also experienced. And when having those difficulties, she accessed a breastfeeding support clinic in my constituency at Meadway Health Centre, which was a huge source of support and benefit to her as she navigated that journey. Does the Honourable Member agree with me that protecting access to those kind of services and ensuring they're there for every woman who wishes to breastfeed is extremely important and something we should support?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and it's as if he's lifted my words directly off the page in a very timely manner, because the reason that I managed to carry on was because I attended a peer support group in my local church hall every Monday morning, aptly called Milk. And actually, it wasn't about the professional support that I got while I was there, although that was great, and shout out to the wonderful Julie, who supported all of the mums there. It was actually the other mums who were going through the same things, who could ask each other questions, offer advice, as well as the amazing trained peer supporters, the volunteers, and a quick shout out to Holly, who showed us that we could and would survive those difficult first few months and come out the other side just like she had. Happy to give way.
The honourable member for securing this really important adjournment debate this evening. In South Derbyshire, I hear of stories of services being cut to support breastfeeding women. As a mum who breastfed to 8 months, but I had that moment where I almost didn't, and it was my community midwife that saved the day for me. I wonder if the honourable member agrees that, as well as having services to support breastfeeding women, whether they're successful in doing it or decide not to do it or can't do it, that actually we should be creating safe spaces for them for that, which is exactly what I've done in my constituency surgery. But I would like to see that in other venues, and I wonder whether she would agree with me on that.
I thank the honourable member for her intervention and for sharing her personal story, and also for advocating for other breastfeeding and formula feeding parents in her constituency. And she highlights that there is a postcode lottery when it comes to that support, and so we need to see across the board those safe spaces for all parents that are feeding. And in the group that I attended, it wasn't just breastfeeding mums, it was mums who were combination feeding or in the process of introducing solids or planning their feeding journey as they navigated returning to work. Some of those women became my closest friends, and I still have them in my life all these years later.
Will she give way on that point?
Happily give way on that point.
Thank you. And I thank the honourable member for bringing this important issue to the chamber. My wife and I are expecting our first in the coming weeks. So as you can expect, this is an important subject that I'm quickly upskilling on. So in my constituency, I have a very similar group, so Exmouth Bosom Buddies, who are doing a really fantastic job, which we know that relieves pressure on the NHS. So what more do you think can be done to allow these groups to really grow, thrive and flourish so they can continue doing their vital work?
Before the honourable member gets to her feet, I'm just reminded of the Crowborough birthing unit in my constituency, midwifery-led, helping lovely mums in my constituency. Jess Brown-Fuller.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and he highlights how important having that community-based support in an area is, but unfortunately not every mother across the UK can say the same for that. There are areas where they have to travel up to an hour by car to attend that sort of group, and I will come on to that. Because when I had my daughter, 5 years after my son, the support that I had relied on had all but vanished. Milk that I had relied on was now being run out of, in effect, a broom cupboard in my local leisure centre, with no opportunity to socialise with other mums. It was only 6 months later that the pandemic hit, and my daughter's health visitor reviews were done via Zoom, often without my daughter even on the screen. The local children and family centre in my constituency never reopened in the same way after the pandemic. Now, I was one of the lucky ones, because I'd already built my village around me 5 years earlier. I had a network of friends and family that I could call on. But for those new mothers in the last decade, that support has been all but vaporised, with community support groups being patchy, often delivered by volunteers or those wonderful midwives in their time off. And it's also essential, Madam Deputy Speaker, to acknowledge and support those parents who cannot or choose not to breastfeed, ensuring that they feel empowered and confident in the decisions they make for their children's nutrition and well-being. So I'm a proud advocate of every parent having choice, but that choice should be an informed one, and currently it's not a level playing field, with formula companies preying on the vulnerability of parents. The Competition and Markets Authority launched a market study into the formula industry in February 2024, and they published their results earlier this year. Now, this provided a comprehensive, in-depth and up-to-date exploration of the infant formula market in the UK through a consultative process that has offered really unique insights into the industry. And I'd just like to read a short extract from the CMA's executive summary on their findings. Parents are often in vulnerable circumstances when they first make choices about whether and which infant formula to use. Their brand choice is often based on incomplete or unclear information, and they are typically then reluctant to switch brands. Against this backdrop, manufacturers place significant emphasis on building their brands, including through their willingness to supply the NHS below cost, and differentiating their products to attract parents rather than competing strongly on price. And price competition between retailers has typically been weak. Our analysis indicates that these features in combination are leading to poor outcomes for parents in terms of the choices they make and prices they pay for infant formula. In short, Madam Deputy Speaker, a vulnerable, extremely tired new parent is making choices on which formula to buy, but often the claims on boxes of commercial infant formula are unfounded, and they're causing parents to choose between a £7 tin of formula or a £14 tin of formula, even though they are nutritionally equivalent. At a recent event, we heard testimonies of parents who had purchased the more expensive brand with bold claims on its packaging, believing that they were doing the best for their child, only to then use less scoops when making a bottle to make the tin last longer. And you only have to look at our supermarket shelves to see formula milk locked behind glass cabinets to show that we have a crisis in families being able to feed their babies. The cost of living challenges have spiralled into a food insecurity crisis, yet formula manufacturers increased prices by 24% in 1 year in 2023, and they continue to rise well beyond inflation. And research shows that parents rarely switch brands once they've introduced a formula milk. This gives formula companies a clear incentive to offer their products to maternity wards at reduced prices, knowing parents are likely to continue using the same brand when they go home. So to address this, the CMA recommends standardised infant formula labelling in healthcare settings, which would eliminate this form of exploitative marketing. Formula companies are also restricted from advertising newborn formula, but they get round this by advertising their follow-on or stage 2 milk and then making the packaging look exactly the same. The CMA recommendations ask for the government to assess whether infant formula and follow-on milks are clearly distinct and then communicate that assessment to the manufacturers and enforcers. A Mintel report from 2016 reported that in 2015, for every baby born in the UK, companies spent a staggering £21 just on marketing follow-on formula. So the CMA has made 11 recommendations to government, all of which aim to improve outcomes for parents. I'm calling on the government today to implement all of the 11 recommendations and finally level the playing field for those parents that rely on formula to feed their babies. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, this debate is very timely, as last week I was delighted to host the World Breastfeeding Trends Initiative launch of their 2024 report here in Parliament. I would be delighted to give the Minister a copy if she doesn't already have one. The key takeaway from the report is that the UK has one of the lowest breastfeeding rates in the world. The report not only highlights the gaps in policy, but it also creates a report card system for each of the 4 nations. And I just want to highlight a few things that were mentioned within that report. Importantly, data, though its collection is uneven across the 4 nations, shows that the majority of mothers do set out to breastfeed. Despite this, by 6 to 8 weeks, around 70% of babies in the UK receive some formula, and by 6 months, only 1% of babies are exclusively breastfed.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Happily give way.
I'd like to commend her for the great work she's doing to improve the relationship, the most important relationship in the world between a mother and her infant. Will she join me in paying tribute to the midwives of Paris Teaching Health Board, who have the largest county in Wales to cover? And we should also join me in paying tribute to Susan Grounds, who after being a midwife for over 20 years, retired in March and was elected as a Lib Dem councillor in April.
I thank the honourable friend for his intervention, and he's absolutely right that quite often these women have been so embedded in their communities for so many years, helping these women raise their babies, that they go on to do marvellous things in the community. And the majority of those who stopped breastfeeding early wanted to breastfeed for longer, but didn't receive the help they needed to resolve problems, all of which could be addressed with support from trained health workers, skilled peer supporters, or specialist help in hospital, at home, or in the community. The World Breastfeeding Trend Initiative report highlighted the absence of national policy and governance in England. Now, the devolved nations have pulled ahead on this front, with Scotland publishing a strategic framework, Wales having had an action plan since 2019, and Northern Ireland currently finalising their very own strategy. Support needs to be baked into policy and legislation because communities cannot do this alone. The government has all the opportunity to act by being so early into the parliamentary term. I was delighted to see the announcement today into a review of the parental leave and pay system, and I hope infant feeding will play into the considerations of better support for parents on maternity and paternity leave. Health visitor teams have also dwindled over recent years, and an estimated 54,000 GP appointments could be saved every year if there was a professional feeding service available in every community. And any strategy must be properly funded and integrated with current programmes across communities and healthcare settings such as family hubs and Start for Life, which should themselves be expanded. Particularly Start for Life, which is currently only funded in half of England's local authorities. Some councils are choosing to make this an area they improve on, and I'm pleased to see my local authority, West Sussex County Council, including the early years as part of their health strategy for the next 5 years, even without the Start for Life funding, which they currently do not receive. I'd like to just very quickly use an example of a mother that got in touch just last week to share her story. She had a traumatic birth with unexpected interventions. Her baby was fed formula by hospital staff very quickly. The pump kit didn't work in hospital, and there was no available or meaningful help. She really wants to feed her baby herself. She looked online when she got home to find help nearby, but there was nothing less than an hour away by car. She is struggling with which formula to use and doesn't really understand what is the difference between them. She doesn't know other women with babies. She's feeling very lost and isolated. Social media is full of conflicting advice, so she has reached out of area for paid support she really cannot afford on maternity pay to help her try and regain a sense of reality. I'm sure this lady's reality is the same for parents across the country. And if the reasons I've highlighted in this debate are not compelling enough, then maybe the economic impact is. UK research on the costs of 4 diseases back in 2012 showed that even reaching moderate breastfeeding levels could save the NHS millions, and that the implementation of proven breastfeeding support systems would pay for itself within a year. For babies, breastfeeding strengthens the immune system and significantly reduces the risk of infections, obesity, asthma, and long-term conditions such as type 2 diabetes. And for the mother, breastfeeding lowers the risk of breast and ovarian cancers, cardiovascular disease, and supports postnatal mental health. There is so much more I could say, Madam Deputy Speaker, but instead I will move to my asks of this government. When will the government make its decision on whether they will accept the 11 recommendations from the Competition and Markets Authority? Will the Minister consider following the devolved nations and introduce a comprehensive national infant feeding strategy to end the postcode lottery and provide support to all parents in their feeding journeys? Will we expect to see something about infant feeding in the upcoming NHS 10-year plan? And finally, there is very little about breastfeeding in most health professional training, but primary care has successfully integrated assisted roles into primary care services such as pharmacists and social prescribers. Could the same model be extended to lactation consultants? I'd like to finish by saying thank you to all of those tireless activists and campaigners who have been fighting for all women to have support, guidance and trusted information when they begin motherhood. I won't risk trying to name them all, as I will no doubt miss some. But a special thank you to the World Breastfeeding Trends Initiative Steering Group, to First Steps Nutrition Trust, and also to the previous Honourable Member for Glasgow Central, who chaired the APPG before the general election. Thank you.
I call the Minister, Minister Ashley Dalton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for securing this debate. Through her leadership of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Infant Feeding, she is working to ensure families across the country get the right support. And I'd like to thank all members that have contributed today, the member for Ribble Valley, Strangford, contributions from the member for Altrincham Sale, South Derbyshire, Exmouth and Exeter East, Brecon, Radwa and Cumtawi. Yeah. And, of course, from yourself, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you. Thank you. I think the number of interventions and contributions in this debate today has just shown how important this issue is and how deeply felt it is across the House. The Honourable Member asked about the 10-year plan. I will not be going into details of what the 10-year plan has got in it, but TikTok, she does not have to wait very long, as this will be launched on Thursday morning. And I look forward to taking forward and working with colleagues from across the House and the wider health landscape on how we deliver in the plan. But within that plan, you will see that children's early years are crucial to the development and their health and their life chances, and that is reflected in the government's mission. And it's why the government's taking a mission-based approach to raising the healthiest generation of children ever, and to ensuring that every child has a healthy, happy start to life. I will.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Just to reiterate my honourable friend's comments and the comments made just now at the dispatch box about all children needing to have a healthy start. We can't emphasise how important gestation and the first 6 months of life is. The factors that affect gestation and the first 6 months of life have a bigger impact on long-term health than anything you can do after that period of time. Any conscious decisions you make about your own health are less impactful than what's happened to you during gestation in the first 6 months of life.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention and agree, and he will see as the 10-year plan comes forward, and also looking at some of the investments that we are making around, for instance, reducing the numbers of women smoking in pregnancy, etc. That is something that the government recognises. And we recognise that infant feeding is critical to a baby's healthy growth and development, and recognise the significant benefits of breastfeeding for both mothers and babies, and are fully committed to supporting families to breastfeed should they choose to do so. We know that most mothers want to breastfeed, but many stop before they would ideally like to. Whilst it's been positive to see many more mothers continuing to breastfeed in recent years, we know that they can face complex barriers to achieving their infant feeding goals. And I recognise the concerns raised through the World Breastfeeding Trend Initiative report on the UK infant feeding policy landscape. Whilst health is devolved, and I would like to recognise the performance in Northern Ireland that was raised by the Honourable Member for Strangford, and commend them on that. But we know through this report that England in particular in the UK scores poorly, and that is something that we want to change, Madam Deputy Speaker. And families need quality services, trustworthy information, affordable options and systems that support, not hinder them. Midwives and maternity services play a crucial role through the perinatal period in preparing and supporting families around infant feeding. We've committed to training thousands more midwives to better support women throughout their pregnancy and beyond. And there has been an increase of over 1,300 full-time equivalent midwives in the workforce since April 2024. We will publish a refreshed workforce plan to deliver the transformed health service that we build over the next decade. And to drive forward improvement on maternity and neonatal services, we announced the launch of a national independent investigation into maternity and neonatal care. The investigation will recommend one set of national actions by December. A national maternity and neonatal task force, chaired by the Secretary of State, will then bring forward independent experts to co-produce a national plan to drive forward. As families transition from maternity services to the community, it's important that they continue to receive the support they need, and health visitors are key to this. But we know health visitor numbers have decreased, and whilst there is variation in level of services across the country, it remains a universal service, and we are committed to that. In the plan to change, we commit to strengthening health visiting services so all families can access their support. We're building on family hubs and Start for Life programme, and investing in this programme with 18.5 million this year to improve infant feeding support across 75 local authorities in England. Start for Life services are helping parents to access support where they need it and in a location that suits them, whether that's their home, their family hub, in a hospital setting, or through some of the many voluntary sector organisations that have been referred to today. And local authorities are working with partners to embed local infant feeding strategies, joining up services for seamless support and tailoring them to their community with both universal and targeted support. We're building up the workforce, investing in infant feeding specialists and delivering high-quality training and expanding networks of peer supporters. Funding is also helping to train staff to identify complex needs early, such as tongue tie, and to offer timely support. And while long-term evaluation is needed to understand the full impact of the programme, some promising findings are emerging. For example, Coventry suggests that their ambitious multi-layered integrated infant feeding plans have led to increased breastfeeding rates. And local health visitor data shows an increase in breastfeeding at 6 to 8 weeks from 51% to 57% in just 18 months. And we're also helping families across the UK to access breastfeeding support 24 hours a day through the National Breastfeeding Helpline.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and she highlights some brilliant examples that are gold standard in care, but does she recognise that the process that the government is currently undertaking, with only half local authorities being funded, means that we still end up with a patchwork level of cover for support for new mothers, and they don't know where they're meant to go because it's different when they cross a county border?
I thank her for her intervention. And through the Family Hub service and the support for Start for Life, that is very much targeted. However, through the Universal Health Visiting Offer, through the National Breastfeeding Helpline, we do aim to be able to offer all women breastfeeding the support that they need to do so. In terms of parental leave, which has been touched upon, we know that supporting parents goes beyond services. Returning to work can influence how families choose to feed their babies. And in the plan to make work pay, we've committed to a review of the parental leave system, which, as the Honourable Member mentioned, was launched. The DBT, the Department for Business and Trade, launched that review into parental leave in the Chamber today, and we're delighted to see that come forward. She did touch upon formula feeding, and I've spoken a lot about breastfeeding, but we absolutely recognise that families cannot, or choose, when they can't or they choose not to breastfeed, it's vital they get formula that's safe, nutritionally complete and affordable. Infant formula regulations and CMA recommendations are important, but we know many families are struggling to afford infant formula. We welcome that report from the CMA into the UK infant and follow-on formula milk. It's highlighted some of the issues that the Honourable Member raised herself, particularly noting that families rely on brand reputation and price as a proxy for quality, often choosing more expensive products. However, specific regulations require all infant formula to comply with robust nutritional compositional standards. So all infant formula sold on the UK market meets the nutritional needs of babies, regardless of the price and brand. The CMA has made 11 recommendations to government, and with 4 aims: to eliminate brand influence in healthcare settings, providing better information for parents in retail settings, strengthening labelling and advertising rules, and ensuring effective enforcement of regulations. The government is supportive of what the CMA is trying to achieve, and we want parents to be confident to choose lower price products and for manufacturers and retailers to compete more on price. The CMA recommendations are UK-wide, and so we're considering them alongside colleagues in the devolved governments and aim to have a UK-wide response available as soon as possible. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for raising this important matter. The Government is committed to giving children the best start in life. We do not underestimate the challenge to get this right for families. We will continue to strengthen key services built on good practice and identify where we can the greatest impact for families. I can also confirm that tomorrow I will be meeting myself with the APPG for babies, and I look forward to discussing these issues further with them.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.